cobbler's bench the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. Pop goes the weasel.
This happened to me about 15-16 years ago, when I was displaced in Las Vegas after Hurricane Katrina occurred. I was 9 years old at the time, and I lived in this cul-de-sac of townhomes. Without sharing all the details, this was the first time I ever had a friend who lived in my neighborhood, so he and I would hang out from the early mornings to about 11 p.m. or so. One night, I can't remember how late, but it was pretty dark outside. While we were hanging out, there was this ice cream truck that was passing around. It hadn't turned on the typical music you hear when a truck's approaching, but when I got near, it began to light up and play the music. My friend and I, who was the same age as myself, approached the truck to see what it had to offer. I decided I didn't want any ice cream, likely because I didn't have any money to buy any, but my friend wanted some. He explained what he wanted to the guy. Then the guy suggested he get in the truck and pick out which flavor, and he would give him the ice cream for free. For some strange reason, my friend was actually going to get in the truck when I yanked his arm and screamed something. Immediately after, we ran to our parents and explained to them what happened. After this, we'd have to be inside by the time the sun set. I can't say for sure what would have occurred, but I'm thankful neither of us got into that truck. My friend and I, age 11 to 12, summer, housing development in Illinois. My first summer in my new home out of the sort of sticks. My friend from school and I loved to run around the neighborhood and into the forest behind the homes. While we were out, we noticed an ice cream truck kinda tracking us. It had its music running, so we sort of rode it off and continued our adventure. Every time we'd pop out of the woods again, the ice cream truck would never be too far behind. Same driver, same plate. We laughed and joked about it being some weird new business tactic to get kids to buy. However, we were broke, so we just kept playing. The stalking was incessant after a while. Every turn we'd make, no matter where we'd pop up in the housing development, it was always near. The driver always pretending he didn't see us, but keeping pace as we walked. Eventually, it was time to go home, and so we did. When I returned home, I told my mum about the experience, and she called the police. After a bit of questioning, they decided I was just letting my imagination run wild, but they'd check it out anyways. The initial search of the neighborhood turned up nothing but a single ice cream truck, driven by a woman, ran by a reputable company. About a week later, they got a similar report by some other younger girl in the neighborhood. They found the truck with the exact guy, completely unlicensed, with a little boy, unconscious, and tied up in the back. Back in my high school years, I'd often meet with a few friends at a local Dunkin' Donuts, which was conveniently near a railway we'd all take to our weed guy's house. My closest friend at the time, Katie, and I usually met up earlier than everyone else just to hang out, order our extra large drinks and hash browns, and attempt at some "Hey mister" shenanigans to score some tall boys from anyone willing to buy us beer. I'd consider us to be pretty naive and overly nice girls, which never proved to be an issue to either of us, until we were nice to the wrong person. And now for a little background of my hometown. I grew up in the forgotten borough of New York City, Staten Island. For those who are unaware, there was, and kind of still is, a pretty horrendous opioid epidemic. So seeing zombie-like civilians strolling the streets is fairly common. Because of this, I became pretty good at spotting out someone struggling with heroin and things of the sort. Anyways, on this one day, Katie and I met up at Dunkin' and sat at our usual booth. We were in the midst of messing around with our phones and being our overly giggly selves when I noticed out of the corner of my eye someone suddenly stop outside of the glass door. Still smiling, I glanced over to see if it was maybe one of our friends, and ended up making direct eye contact with a basic Staten Island looking dude. I looked away, unbothered, and carried on. Just another customer anyways. After the guy got his coffee, he sat directly at the table across from our booth. I chose to ignore the fact he sat weirdly close and resisted eye contact, since that already awkwardly happened. But I guess the motion caught Katie's attention as she looked over her shoulder at the man settling in. She looked back at me, made a face that said, okay, and we just giggled and tried to move on. Every now and then, I glanced in his direction, mainly just because I like to be observant of my surroundings, but also because I kept seeing him scratch at his nose, neck and face in my peripheral vision, and noticed he was bleeding from various little cuts on his body. This was a dead giveaway he was doing some form of opiate, as they tend to get very itchy and scratch until they break skin. A few minutes later, the man asked if one of us had a charger he could borrow. I kindly denied, and Katie only had an iPhone charger while the man clearly had an Android phone. This slight exchange was enough for the man to feel invited, and he'd continued to make comments for quite some time. Being that this was about 4 years ago, I don't remember the entire conversation, but I do remember him often asking general questions like if we live around here, what we do in our free time, and creepy things of the sort. I was pretty vague yet polite in my responses, but Katie was always a bit more enthusiastic in her words, making it pretty easy for this guy to reciprocate and basically join our conversation altogether. In Katie's innocent stupidity, the guy basically found out some of the main train stops we'd get off at to hang in those areas. He also found out if we indulge in the devil's lettuce, which only made this guy feel even more inclined. At some point, he mentioned how his ex-girlfriend got him into some trouble, got him into heroin, which he used to sell, served jail time for, and pretty recently got out. He also mentioned how he's been an ice cream truck driver ever since his release. He told us that he's always driving around the train stops Katie mentioned earlier. He also, repeatedly, offered to give us rides around in his truck someday, with free ice cream as the bribe. Again, we were pretty naive and overly nice girls, Katie more so than I. So one thing led to another, and eventually this guy was asking for Katie's social media, which she happily obliged to. She's always been really dedicated to expanding her follower count. Throughout this entire exchange, I was mostly just nodding, smiling, laughing here and there, so my remaining silent during the social media exchange went unnoticed. However, once the guy started following Katie on Instagram, he quickly found mine through a tagged picture on her page. I wasn't private at the time, so he immediately started liking and commenting on nearly every one of my pictures. The comments were extremely cringy, consisting of heart eye and water squirt emojis, and things like, "Damn, ma." Finally, after the longest half hour ever, I urged we should really be catching our train. Fortunately, the man wasn't persistent after that, and we were on our way with no problem. After some verbal recap of what just happened, I convinced Katie to block him, and I did the same. we brushed it off with that. I honestly forgot about this strange interaction until about a week later. I was hanging out with some friends at a park near my high school when Munchies made me crave Ralph's Ices, which was just up the block. I ventured off with one other friend and almost made it to the store before the sound of an ice cream truck approached from behind us. Completely lost in conversation, my attention was only caught by the high-pitched screeching of the truck's brakes and a somewhat familiar voice. Of course it was him. He shouted out to me, but with Ralph's only a couple of feet in front of us, I ignored him and rushed in with my friend. The guy didn't stick around, being that he was blocking the whole lane on a narrow two-way road, but we still called our friend at the park to pick us up in his car. For the next 2 weeks, there were about 4 times this man tried to pick me up in his truck. At this point, making me pretty paranoid I was potentially being stalked. The last time it happened, he was parked directly outside one of the train stops, almost as if he was waiting for me. He again called out to me asking why I blocked him and saying he just wants to be friends. At this point, I had enough and told him to leave me alone. My dad's a lieutenant, which was a lie but slipped out in my defense. I walked away before he could respond and into the diner I was meeting my friends at that night. I saw his truck drive away in the window and never had an interaction with the ice cream man again. The sound of an ice cream truck has haunted me ever since. I brought this up to my cousin the other day. 15 years later, we can still recall everything about that morning. 15 years later, we still hear her screaming. My older cousin and I grew up together. My father only has one sibling, and we all lived at the end of the same road, and so my cousin and I naturally spent a lot of time together. He's a big guy, 6'5", 350 pound, built like a linebacker. We lived in the middle of nowhere, in a small town in the southern US, outskirts of the outskirts, where bumfuck Egypt comes to get away from it all. My backyard opened up into a state forest, hundreds of miles of trees and briar bushes, and the occasional escaped convict. And poisonous snakes, lots of those. It's just like every other morning as my cousin and I groggily make our way to the bus stop. Our bus driver liked to come at random times, so we often had to wait around for a while and debate on whether or not it's actually important that we finish school. It's 6:20 in the morning. The sun isn't quite up yet. Birds are starting to chirp. My cousin is in high school. I'm roughly in the 4th grade. Naturally, we don't talk much in our post-sleep stupor. And then we hear it. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. I look at my cousin. My cousin looks at me. Every child knows that jingle. The ice cream truck. The ice cream truck. Yay, the ice cream truck. Except it's 6:30 in the morning, and we don't live anywhere near town. The monkey thought it all for fun. Pop goes the weasel. My cousin tugs on my shirt, pulling me closer to him. His hand is bigger than my shoulder, and he does not let me move from his side. We're looking around, eyeing the trees, wondering how the hell an ice cream truck got all the way out here. Our town didn't even have an ice cream truck back then. There were less than 4,000 people in the town, if that, and there was not an ice cream truck. And then, the woman yelled, screamed, a full-throated scream that echoed all over the holler. Help, they're killing me, help! What? I'm scared, absolutely terrified and shaking. My cousin shushes me and boosts me up on his hip. The jingle continues, and damn if it isn't suddenly the most terrifying thing I've ever heard. Something heard in every children's movie, played out of every goddamn ice cream in the US. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. Help! The bus turns the corner, coming to a stop beside us with a weary hiss. We're frozen, staring at the woods behind us, where we're sure the noise was coming from. But how could it? There's nothing out there but miles and miles of nothing. No houses, no people, not even a road or a path. My cousin hurls me onto the bus and shoves me into a seat, eyes trained on the trees behind us. The bus door slides closed, and we hear it one more time. The monkey thought it all for fun, pop goes the weasel. This all happened within the last 2 to 3 hours. My mum and I have been trying to catch the ice cream truck all summer, as they have some certain ice cream bars that you can't really get anywhere else around here. We were in the middle of watching a show when we suddenly heard the ice cream truck outside. It was loud, signifying that it was close. I got up and went to the door. I saw that it was in front of our house. I began to say it was too late, but I then realized it was slowing down, not driving away. Now this wasn't an, oh, there is someone coming, I should stop, slow down. It was an, I've been slowing down to a stop since before you opened the door, slow down. My mum told me to go out and make sure he didn't drive away. It was odd, as it was about 9 p.m, but we wanted our ice cream. My mum came outside and we ordered. The guy was quiet, but said that he stopped because he heard voices. No one was outside, and we were inside when we were talking. There was an open garage door a few houses down, but no one was there. He was able to find the flavor I asked for, but had some trouble finding the one my mum asked for.
I just saw it. I just ate one.
I figured that he was new to the job and just nervous, so I thought nothing of it. We paid and went back inside. Once we got inside, however, I noticed mine was open. I asked my mum if she had opened it, as she is the one who had both of the treats. She said no. She offered me hers, as we both knew neither of us wanted to eat an opened ice cream bar. When she noticed that hers was really puffed up, as if it had been blown up with air. We threw both of them away. After thinking about it for a few minutes, it all seemed so weird. 9 p.m. The music suddenly turned on when we both heard it. It didn't slowly fade in as if it had been on the whole time. It slowed to a stop in front of our house before I even opened the door. He was quiet and gave us 2 suspicious ice cream bars. He sped away after that, not stopping for anyone else. Just 15-ish minutes ago, I called my mum in from the garage to tell her that the cats were trying to catch this bug that looked like a wasp or something. As she came in, she saw something through the kitchen window. She rushed me to the front door, in the next room, and when she opened it, a different car drove away. I didn't see the full thing, but she says it was pulled over with the lights on and quickly peeled out of there when we opened the door. My dad just came home, and we told him about everything. He thinks it's odd, but that's about it. Sure, the 2 incidents could be 2 totally innocent, coincidental occurrences, but it's too weird. My mum wants me to sleep in the living room on the other couch tonight, just in case something happens, and I have no objections because I'm nervous as hell. Creepy people that we saw tonight, let's not meet again. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below. So feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.